Despite a rebound in Oklahoma's economy, state government faces yet another budget hole next year and more cuts to state services in the immediate future. Those cuts are expected to fall especially hard on education and have added fuel to talk of a teacher walkout, unless lawmakers can find some way to raise new revenue and fund a long-awaited teacher pay raise.
When the State Board of Equalization met this week to certify the amount of revenue lawmakers will have to spend next fiscal year, it was a mixed bag of some good news along with some bad. The board authorized the legislature to spend just over $7 billion in the new fiscal year that begins July 1st. Governor Mary Fallin noted that is an increase of more than $100 million over the current fiscal year budget.
But we also have a large amount of obligations that are due now that are things we've already committed to pay for in previous legislation. And also we have our medical schools, which are having a challenge with some of the federal rules and regulations changing that we need to address and make sure we don't lose our accreditation with the medical schools.
The loss of federal funds for Oklahoma's two medical schools will cost the state about $110 million. Taken all together, that leaves the state facing a budget hole next fiscal year of about $167 million.
And that's not giving any agencies such as corrections, Department of Human Services, mental health, it's not restoring any of their cuts. They'll still keep the current cuts that they've had and probably have cuts next year. It's certainly not paying for any teacher pay raises.
Meanwhile, the governor says she plans to sign a bill passed by lawmakers this week that balances the current fiscal year budget by using carryover money from last year and further cutting state services.
We're well over the time period when that budget should have been closed out, and the fiscal year ended at the end of June. So I think it's time to close it out, move on into FY19's budget, finish the legislative session, balance the books.
Once the governor signs that bill into law, agencies will be facing cuts totaling almost 2% beginning in March.
And as we go into 19, if we don't have any new revenue that comes up on the table, we still could have approximately about a 2.5% cut beginning as we finish this legislative year for FY19.
Further cuts would be difficult for the State Department of Education, which is already facing the loss of $16.2 million for the remainder of this fiscal year. The agency is asking for a budget next year of more than $2.9 billion to fulfill the proposals in its 8-year Oklahoma EDGE plan, an increase of nearly $474 million over the current fiscal year, even before the latest cuts. Nearly $288 million of that increase would go to fund a $5,000 a year pay raise for teachers. Hopes for a teacher pay raise were dashed last week with the failure of House Bill 1033. But Fallin says she's been in talks with House Speaker Charles McCall about finding some revenue to give educators some sort of raise next year.
Maybe not to the extent that we hope to, and we all want to, but we're going to have to look at some alternative methods that probably would not require 76 votes, and I don't know if that can be determined or not.
State Superintendent of Public Instruction Joy Hoffmeister says it would be hard to accept anything less than a $5,000 increase for teachers.
When I stepped into office 3 years ago, we asked for $5,000 phased in over 5 years. So we're talking right now about year 4 on that plan. I would have to really take some time to consider what that number would be, talk with teachers. But for me, it's about being regionally competitive, and I'm sticking with that number.
Hoffmeister believes a $5,000 raise could have a steadying effect, noting that teachers are coming up on an April 1st deadline to sign new contracts.
If a $5,000 pay raise could be passed, then that could stabilize for the next 3 years those who may consider retiring, and they may put that off for another 3 years because that increase would have a positive impact on their future retirement benefits.
Some teachers are venting their frustration with the legislature over the failure to fund a pay increase. An online petition has begun circulating, suggesting the possibility of a teacher walkout if lawmakers don't take action to raise teacher pay, saying teachers need a raise of $10,000 annually to be regionally competitive. Hofmeister says she's sympathetic to the petition's backers.
I get it. I understand that it feels that there is nothing that gets the attention of legislatures to provoke the kind of legislative action that's required.
But she stops short of endorsing a walkout.
I want to champion what our children need, but we cannot take steps moving forward that further injure kids, risk harming them any further. And I am very concerned about what that would do, what message that sends.
Oklahoma law prohibits teachers' unions from striking or threatening to strike as a means of resolving differences with the Board of Education. Meanwhile, Governor Fallin is not optimistic that a new compromise can be worked out that will garner the 3/4 majority of legislators needed to pass any kind of tax increase to raise new revenue.
It's just the way it is, and after, like I said, 54 weeks of trying to negotiate on last year's budget and seeing no action by the caucuses to get to 75% for a vote on new revenue, it is what it is.